I'm Sarah Schilling, and this is
Kelsey Schilling.
we are members of Forgotten Clefs, and we are so excited today to speak with a special guest about an upcoming concert we're doing for the Bloomington Early Music Festival. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to lately?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me for this. I'm really excited to talk to you. My name's Liza Malamut. I live in Chicago as of yesterday, and I am the incoming artistic director of the Newberry Consort and a member of Incantare, and I will be teaching sackbut at Indiana University this fall.
That's really exciting. Yeah, I'm sure that really looking forward to having you there. And I know there's always a lot of people who want to study the sackbut at IU, so they're very lucky that you're coming. So we both went to Indiana University, and our group was started as many groups do, sort of as a student group at the university, and we would rehearse a lot on the third floor. One time, Nigel North even coached us loud band. I was shocked.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, of course, because he's a lutenist, and he wanted to sit right in the middle of our shams. So
one of our favorite pictures is him plugging his ears because of all the shams surrounding him.
Yeah, so we have this upcoming concert. It's a digital release for Bloomington Early Music Festival. We're based in Indiana, but we'll be recording this concert in Richmond, Virginia, where we have access to some larger venues. And the concert's called Leonora de Este's Ferrara. I know, Liza, that like 16th and 17th century Italian music is actually something you know a lot about. So I don't know if you want to clue us into what your work has been in that area a little bit, maybe get us started towards our show as well.
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, it's so cool that you're not only doing Italian 17th century, 16th and 17th century music, which I love, but that you're focusing it on a women-centric program, and you have wind players on it, because I think that's a really not necessarily under research, because the research is there, but sort of ignored area of this type of music. I got really intrigued by it. I think it was like a couple of years ago. There's an amazing multi-volume dissertation that was written on women wind players in early modern Europe, and it was just so enlightening, because it sort of it opened up this whole can of worms. As we think of women having very specific roles in music, especially in Italy. If they were performing, they were only in convents, or if they were or they just didn't play wind instruments at all, or there are one or two composers that we're familiar with, and we're familiar with a lot of women as patronesses of music, and that was a huge role, obviously, that they played. But the fact that you guys are doing wind music in a women-centric concert, I think, really brings all these things together. So it's a huge topic that really needs to be just opened up and explored. So it's really cool.
Yeah, you brought up this issue of women doing feminine things, and maybe wind playing isn't one of those things. And we definitely found that in terms of the patronage for our music. The major patrons of some of the earlier music we are looking at were Isabella d'Este and Lucrezia Borgia d'Este, and they both were like, ugh, wind instruments, that's so Machiavellian and male and warlike. We're not doing that. And so there's all this language around wind instruments being for men at this time, but they did both employ a pipe and tabor player. And so we are excited to bring that sound as something they would have definitely had. Some of that's probably because pipe and tabor players, they weren't just instrumentalists, they were also really entertainers and clowns. And we see that in Shakespeare's plays, that it's a clown, pipe and tabor player, musician, entertainer, sort of to keep you company, providing commentary on the events of what's happening. But yeah, certainly women, even during this period, but especially later with Raffaella Aliotti, would have been making a lot of this music as well as writing it. So yeah. you know.
Yeah, it was really interesting when an area of that's been really fascinating to me has been when the few times you see women playing wind instruments in Italian courts, like in Mantua, there are actually a couple of the women singers in their version of the Concerto della Donna that played sackbut and cornetto, along with singing and of course playing, plucked. And that sort of really was extremely interesting to me. But I know the focus of your program is the patronage and what would have sort of been encompassed by that. And I'm actually really curious. I'm actually looking at your program right now, and it's a really cool and very varied selection of stuff. I was wondering if you could just tell me about some of the pieces on the program.
Yeah. So the program, it's kind of this fake journey. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
To kind of bring all of these elements together, we're sort of imagining some type of event, possibly like a banquet in the say first decade of the 17th century. So Raffaella Aleotti this is still during her lifetime. Her music has already been published. Leonora d'Este, her music, or what we believe was her music, seems to have been circulated in 1543. So it's reasonable to think that it was out there. So that's how we are combining these two composers with other composers from a similar time period in northern Italy. We have some Parma, Lucca, these other centers in northern Italy, and so we've kind of structured the whole program like, sort of like the flow of a banquet performance, with some sacred music and then the dance music mixed in.
Yeah, and as far as Leonora d'Este's music, her publications I think are really interesting, and both Kelsey and Adam observed this, that the music, some of it is written in a sort of wider voicing as we would expect for 4 and 5 part music, but some of it's actually written in like very close voice, like as if it was the same voice of singer, like just sopranos and altos, just women singing, or perhaps, as we're going to experiment with a little bit, similar voiced instruments. So can you talk a little bit more about like that kind of tradition and what we're doing?
Right. So Laurie Strauss is the one who discovered this collection and believes that this set is by Leonora d'Este. And there's actually some fine print on the title page of the collection that says for equal voices. So from that, we gather that this is music written for nuns, and in a high tessitura. So we're going to be playing around a little bit with that because some of the music is written in very normal clefs, like a C1, C3, C4, F4 type.
What we call like, I know but what we call like soprano, alto, tenor clefs, sort of the typical Renaissance.
But then other pieces are written in a tighter registration. So we're gonna, I think there's one piece we're gonna be doing in 2 different versions, just to kind of demonstrate the different registration possibilities there.
I think it was like a couple tenor dulcians, a sackbut, and then a bass dulcian playing kind of up higher, so it's all sort of closer voiced than the broader type. And it's like sometimes, I don't know what your experience is with this, Liza, but sometimes we see all these different clefs, and sometimes it's demonstrative of maybe this is for this instrument, or maybe this is for this voice type. But sometimes it's just like, well, I can write this here and we can move this around as needed. So I don't know what your take is on that, or like when you witness this kind of music, what kind of information you get from it with all these different clefs.
Yeah, sure. And I think, like you said, it's all really contextual as well. if we know this music is written for a convent choir and it's tight registration and it's all very high, there's an indication that it's probably sung where it is. Although in other situations you have, the chiavette where, you see high clefs and you know it's automatically going to be transposed down because they just simply wouldn't have sung it that high. So you have, it's really interesting. The context is just so important. It's like, where is this music being sung? Who's singing it? Are they kids? Are they men? Are they, is it a women's choir in a convent? Of course, then you have the question that's raised of like, who were the instrumentalists at the convent as well? Did you have like low players, dulcians or bajon or like sackbut players who would have filled out the bottom voices? And then you have to ask yourself like, okay, if they had those players and they were going to be performing this music, then do you sort of do the same thing where you have high clefs and you transpose them down? But I think it really is very contextual, and it sounds like on your program, the demonstrations that you're doing with this music really kind of illustrates that, because you can hear the different ways this would have been performed. It sounds like maybe you're doing it with different instruments that would have been demonstrative of perhaps how it would have sounded at that range where it was written. I know that at the for the Concerto della Donna, that all the music is quite high, so that it would have been for sort of equal or very close range women's voices, but also like for a fact, like here's the group that was singing them. So yeah, it's super interesting. I love talking about this because obviously it's been very controversial in the past Monteverdi Vespers, but
well, we think we should just do it, and whether there's 100% evidence for it or not, the music, I think all the music we're playing was published, whether anonymously or under people's names. And because it's in print, to me, that shows that it was disseminated and that people owned it and had it and did what they wanted with it. And there's such a rich like combination of amateur music making and court level music making. And in these convents, like these nuns weren't just like sitting and praying all day. These were major centers of art making and creation, and ways for the these patronizing families to show like how powerful they were through this wonderful art, right? So we're really lucky that they decided to invest so much in these arts, and maybe a little less in their military, but that's great, because then we have all this music and a lot of the instruments. We know that some of Leonora d'Este, during her time, there would have been more of like a sham sound. It's a little earlier, but in this concert, we're doing a little bit of sham playing, but we're choosing to focus more on our slightly later sound with the dulcians and the sackbut, and of course, recorders. Our recorders are kind of late Renaissance recorders. We can talk about that because it's recording. And so like, yeah, we can record shams, but the dulcian is just, it's a little more forgiving. And
no, but also because we're kind of imagining this made up event. It's already, say, the early 17th century, right. And dulcian's by that time a more important instrument than the sham. So.
Maybe you could talk about how that decision-making process works. Like, when do you decide to use dulcians? When do you decide to use shams? When do you decide to do sort of a mixed concert of instruments, or just like all reeds, all brass?
Yeah, well, I want to say just a bigger picture thing, and then maybe get into some more detail. So there was one time that we all live in different places. Adam lives in Canada now. Kelsey and I live in Virginia, and Keith and Chris, they live in near Bloomington. That's our core group. So kind of like with your group, we're always traveling to make these programs happen. And there was one time, I think we were traveling and we had soprano, alto, tenor, bass sackbuts, alto, tenor, bass, dulcian, 14 crumb horns or whatever, like just this car exploding with instruments. And we were like, maybe we don't have to do this every time. Maybe we don't have to pull out our entire Wunderkammer of toys every single time, right? So maybe you can talk a little more about like how we determine for this program anyway, like what the instruments would be.
Oh, well, yeah. So with the Leonora Day collection, this what is it? The Musica Quinque Vocum from 1543. There's no modern edition of it yet. We're working from facsimile that we found in online collections, and you know, the Clefs are just a ride, and they're kind of all over the place. So I have a big spreadsheet I made where I just started, instead of being able to look at an entire score of a piece, I just went through every single piece and put the range and the clef that it's in. And when you look at these ranges and the clefs, it just becomes obvious that more things are going to work on dulcians. They just have a little bigger range and
a little more chromatic range.
Yeah, well. and more chromatic, and they're just a little bit more versatile than the shawms.
Of course, sackbuts work either way. So it was going to be sackbut either way.
Yeah, thank goodness for sackbut.
I know, thank goodness for sackbut.
I always say.
And then recorder is just a really core part of our sound, and so we always, no matter what the other programming is, we always have recorders in our sound. And are we using the soprano through the C bass for this? I think.
Almost.
Yeah,
definitely.
And we like to think of having a 4-foot sound and an 8-foot sound, right? So the 4-foot sound would be these higher sounds. It's an octave higher than printed, but it's sort of what we would more typically expect. And in defense of people playing soprano, alto, tenor, basset, consort, Pretorius says to do that. He's like, oh yeah, that sounds great with a choir, that octave doubling, no problem. So it is a historical practice to play it up there, but sometimes it's just so amazing if you have like an alto or even a tenor instrument as the top voice. You just get into the basement of these really beautiful, sweet, soft sounds. And so we like playing with, even within the recorder consort, all the different colors you can get depending on the range of instruments available. We don't have a Garkline in this concert, but maybe someday.
It's really cool. And when you're playing all these different instruments for these very varied pieces, is there also sort of a contextual element? Like, would you choose, for example, to play reeds and brass for music that was taking place in a certain venue as opposed to a different one? And the same for recorders, and what goes into that decision-making process sort of in a historical, contextual basis?
Well, certainly outdoor music, we want to play instruments that would have been heard. Yeah, so that's a lot of it. Are there other indicators?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think all our instruments sound best in certain environments.
Yeah. Maybe the hardest one to program, actually. I don't even remember. Is there any crumhorn on this show?
Just in the dance.
Yeah. We
have a dance set.
We had to buy crumhorns, Liza, because we kept playing these concerts, and people were like, "You're a Renaissance band.
You do crumhorns?
Where are the crumhorns? Where are they?" So even if it's just a little flavor of that, we always try to have some crumhorn. But since the historic crumhorns would have a range of a ninth, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like you really have to exactly choose music that is suited to those instruments. And today, there's a wide tradition of amateurs playing crumhorns, but they were definitely a professional instrument in the Renaissance. And so there's has its own challenges. But
that's really cool. I really like that you're including the crumhorn sound, and so much. This is a personal opinion that I actually have been talking about with several other folks recently that I think is starting, I hope, to become more widely shared. But I think our sort of, we have a bit of a modern vision of what the sound, of Renaissance music is. There's a lot of, I almost feel like blasphemous saying this, but it's not all like this sort of round, very pure sound. The reeds and the sort of buzz would have been such a core element of Renaissance and even early Baroque playing. And I think I'm really hoping that's starting to get more into our ears as we start to program this music, because I think it's just a very important element. Everything points to that sound, as the regal being such a prominent instrument that we hardly ever use today. I mean, well, partially because in the US we don't have enough to actually use, but the crumhorn was everywhere. Even the style of singing, there's another group that I'm interested in. The Cut Circle is starting to think about, like, sort of even how the core sound of voices would have been to sort of emulate or attune with the instruments around them. So anyway, that's just sort of a personal opinion that I have after exploring this music for so long, that I think it's really cool that you guys are integrating that. And but I think actually, to my other question, I'm curious. So this concert is sort of this made up event, as you say, and I know that in a lot of records of these big, like, grand, like, whatever banquets that would have happened, there's just a lot of variety. There are reports of, like, oh, and like 6 sackbuts played this motet, and then the crumhorns played, and then this played. Do you have sort of a model that you're following for how you're choosing to both lay out the program, where you're putting the pieces and the instruments that you're using on each piece? Is it like purely a sonic and practical decision, or do you have sort of previous models in your mind that you're emulating?
Well, like you're discussing, there are all these records of feasts that happen, but we don't have 21 or 27 musicians. So
yeah.
what we are trying to show is the variety with 5 players, but also a lot of instruments, right?
Right.
Yeah, as far as within the program, we really needed to make sure to showcase a lot of sacred music in this concert. So we wanted to make sure that was sort of at the center of it and at the core, that we did these motets and a lot of the sacred music at the center. And then we're a loud band, so we wanted to start and end being a loud band, loud and playing this celebratory type of music.
I think the way we're accomplishing some of this variety is just by virtue of the fact that this is a recording, and so we do have the luxury of, like, okay, in a live performance we wouldn't go immediately from where we wouldn't alternate recorders with dulcians constantly, but but we can do that with a recording. So there might be some things like that.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to playing this show soon. As of this recording, we have yet to record it, and I got some ideas. Maybe we'll stand in different places for some variety. We'll have to think about it. And we could stand in the balcony, we could stand on the floor. We'll have to see what happens. But thank you so much for talking with us. And
yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
To your work at IU and in Chicago. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye.